Industries and Public Enterprises, Government of India. He's joined here by Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal, Mr. Pawan Munjal, and Mr. Suman Kant Munjal. So then, formally, namaskar and a very, very good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to the 8th edition of the Mindmine Summit, which is an annual flagship event of the Mindmine Institute, an independent think tank set up by the Hero Group through Hero Corporate Service Limited Company. The summit is an initiative to generate intellectual discussions and build thought leadership on pertinent contemporary subjects of importance for the Indian financial, political, and policy scenario. We are joined here this morning by a rather formidable set of rather distinguished and eminent persons. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our honored chief guest, Mr. Praful Patel, Honorable Minister of Heavy Industries and Public Enterprises, Government of India. Friends, for the last 7 years, the Mindmine Summit has been deliberating on issues like challenges of globalization, reinventing Indian business, and the global economic crisis. The 2012 Mindmine Summit, India in Transition for Better or for Worse, candidly assessed pitfalls caused by the slowing economy. As the interplay of political and economic forces grows with every passing week, it seemed just perfect to base this year's summit on precisely this subject. Hence the theme of the 8th Mindmine Summit, Today's India, Economics or Politics. At the outset, may I request the Honorable Chief Guest, Mr. Praful Patel, and the other honored guests seated on the stage, and I'd like to request Mrs. Renu Munjal also to come up and join them and proceed for the lamp lighting ceremony. Thank you.
For the second one. Yes. 3 years ago. Yes.
Thank you very much, ma'am, and thank you, gentlemen. I'd now like to call upon Mr. Sunil Kant Munjalji to address the audience and present before you the theme of this year's summit.
Mr. Praful Patel, Suman, Pavan, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 8th Mindmine Summit. This is what people tell us, one of the truly independent summits that takes place in Delhi, not connected to any media house or any one specific industry association, and is able to take up contemporary issues to discuss year after year. And we've been fortunate to get some outstanding individuals to come and address this summit. One of the changes that we made a few years ago made it even more interesting. We stopped all presentations and speeches. So every session is truly an interactive session from the word go. And that makes a big difference to the involvement of the audience, as also their ability to grasp the subject at hand. Over the years, the subjects have evolved with what is happening both in India and globally. Mindmine itself, as a think tank, was set up to address issues to do with India, the economy, industry, and global relations. We've been fortunate to get knowledge partners like the IIT Delhi, the ISB, IIM Lucknow, as also the MDI. We started in 2006 with the first one, where it said, strategy, emerging business challenges, search for winning responses. All of you know what was happening in 2006 in India. In 2007, the theme was on globalization. It said, imagining, investing, inventing, the global manager. That was a time when lots of Indian companies were turning global, either going out of India themselves or with the global companies coming in India. The role of the manager in India was changing quite significantly. Next year, it said restructuring and reinventing Indian business. This was when the big crisis actually hit India. 2009, the theme was on challenges of troubled times, opportunities and threats. It was clear we were in a bit of a crisis. The world was in a crisis. But at the same time, in crisis of the kind we had, there were certainly interesting opportunities available, and many companies, many countries did take advantage of that. We were one of the few countries which responded faster than most others to help industry come out of this. And I have to say the government in that case was very, very responsive to the situation and pulled out all the stops for supporting economic growth. In 2010, we asked the question, is this India's defining moment? Because we had come out of this crisis quicker than all others. And we seemed to be responding better to what was going on in the global economy. 2011 continued down the same road and said, thriving in uncertainty, is this the real India? Because you could see while things had got better, there was still a significant amount of uncertainty around in the environment. 2012 looked at India in churn and also the forces shaping this churn. It said India in transition for better and worse. This year, there has been a lot of talk that, in fact, it carried on for a long time, that there has been a significant amount of inaction on policy making. Many in industry, many outside of India pointed a finger at the government for its lack of ability to push through the reforms which it had started by itself. Very often we heard the refrain from government that it's difficult in the kind of democracy that we run to convince a large number of allies on all of your economic programs. We also heard repeatedly that the opposition has become obstructive and is not really constructive and is holding back many of the major decision-making policies that the government would like to implement. The question then asked was, is it not the government's role to convince its own allies and the opposition as to what it wants to do and where it wants to take this country? The answer is still open. So it will be interesting to hear from the minister what his view is on whether we are striking the balance between making India a completely economically focused nation, a completely market-driven economy, or will politics play a bigger role? And where do we strike the balance? I think that's the question which is being asked, because it's clear, in the kind of world that we live in the kind of fractured polity that we have as a nation, it's unlikely that any one political party would get a majority and be able to run a government. It looks like we will have coalition governments in India for a while. That being the case, how do you most efficiently then run a coalition? Don't forget, some of our best and toughest decisions have also actually been taken during coalitions, and coalitions of extremely differing points of views within the government itself. So it's clear that it can be done, it has been done. So where do we stand today? They say nothing succeeds like success. You know, only a few years ago we used to say everything about India is just going right. And it also seems we took the foot off the pedal. Because things were going so well, we kind of forgot that any policy initiative does not show up the result right away. It takes a few years for the results to show. So a lot of the momentum that we had of the earlier years of reform was still giving us a fair amount of tailwind. But in recent years, we faced both pushback from the domestic as also the global economies. And both of these have raised questions and challenges on what the government needs to do. The other thing which is interesting is it's not as if the government is completely sleeping, because the government has done some pretty path-breaking reforms even in the last 6 months. Is it then our ability to implement these? Is it our ability to sell these to the customers, which is industry and the consumer and civil society, both within India and outside, which needs to be re-looked at to see how we can make best use of some of the outstanding policy initiatives which have been taken? We have had an economy which grew at 9%. Yesterday at a meeting at CII, the Prime Minister pointed out that maybe industry is being too pessimistic, saying, don't forget, we have a run rate of over, if you see our growth over the 10-year period, it's a near 9% or near 8% growth rate. Even if you see 15 years, it's a 7.5% growth rate, which is very significant by any standard in the world. So this current 5% should not overly worry us. It should, of course, concern us that we need to take care of our own mood, because the mood tends to drag down many of the economic indicators themselves. So we need to be careful, we need to be cautious, and we need to be optimistic, because clearly we have a lot of good going for us. I believe he's right when he says we have a lot of good going for us, and we don't often talk about the good going for us. But our challenges are the same today as they were 20 years ago. A very large section of our population which still lives below the poverty line, which has challenges of getting fed, of getting housing, of living a normal standard of living that any one of us would like all of the citizens of this nation to live in. So at the top end, India does do well. We've produced more billionaires than many other countries. Our companies have gone out and acquired and set up businesses across the globe. Are we able, therefore, to meet the challenges of full spectrum, all of India. So around the theme, we have a series of sessions between today and tomorrow, and a large number of well-known, renowned individuals, opinion makers, thinkers, leaders from all walks of life who will be with us in these sessions. And since you will be part of the sessions yourselves, I'm hoping by the end of 2 days, all of us would get out of these sessions richer than when we came in. In the evening today, we also have the BML Munjal Award ceremony. I would request all of you to stay on in the evening. That's at 7:30. Mr. Shashi Tharoor is coming in to give away the awards in the evening today. These are awards given to companies who focus on people, their development, and whose business then gains from it. So we are fortunate this morning to have one of those who's been called one of our best performing ministers in the Indian government in a long time. Thank you very much for agreeing to be with us at the inaugural session, Mr. Praful Patel. You have had an interesting career coming from business into politics, and having become a successful politician, you've reached pretty much the top. You've been in the cabinet now for a while. You've led the charge on a sector in India which people used to say can never reform. You've truly opened up the skies in India, both through the airlines and changing the way the airports are perceived. And now you have a responsibility where we are all concerned with heavy industries. So it'll be interesting to hear from you what you think is going on both in industry, in the economy, and are we banking too much on political decisions? Are we willing to take the tough decisions which may not seem politically palatable, but the reality is they will in the long run be good for all of India, and therefore politically they should be the right things to do. It's been said, if you want to have the rainbow, you also have to put up with the rain. So there are some tough calls, I guess, all of us need to make. And we'd like to hear from you what you think is the current situation in our balance between politics and economics. And if it's okay with you, after you speak, we'd like to have an interactive session with you for the rest of this session. Thank you very much. And may I now invite Mr. Praful Patel.
Mr. Pawan Munjal, Mr. Sunil Munjal, Suman Munjal, and of course all distinguished guests here and participants in this Mindmine summit this morning. I'll be very brief. As has been pointed out, it's going to be more an interactive session, so I'll limit myself to very brief opening remarks. Anyway, there's not very much to talk about nowadays, so it's also best not to speak much. Well, I do see these are very ideal words. Good economics is good politics, or good politics is good economics. I mean, this debate can always keep going on, depending on which side of the spectrum you are. If you look at me as a businessman, I'll talk differently. If you talk to me as a politician, I will talk exactly the opposite. So these debates in our country will keep on going on. But one thing is certain, and I have observed, both as a businessman earlier, of course, now I don't do any active business anymore, but as a politician and as a businessman, if you look at it whichever way, one thing everybody must acknowledge, that India's demographics have changed very rapidly only in the last 10-15 years. So what we traditionally thought in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, or even up to 2000, I think in the last 10-15 years, India has very rapidly moved, and the entire profile, the demographics of India has changed. And that actually has started putting much more pressure on whether it's business, because you become much more competitive than ever before, whether it's politics, which has also become very competitive than ever before, as well as the aspirational change in the country, which has started making everybody demand that much more from all sections, whether it's businessmen, politicians, or whoever else. So that is, I think, one of the reasons why when we look at all the different aspects of our day-to-day life, I think we must understand that we have to live in a much more competitive and a different environment than ever before. And now it's not competition from within. You're competing with nations. You're competing with so many other sections on every different front. So the advantages which we had over a period of time are now slightly reduced, I would say. I won't say they've gone away, but they are slightly reduced. The other side is that, of course, as a young nation, I mean, 68% of India is 35 years and below. So when you look at when we talk of the politics, Pawan, when our own experience, say my own experience, I've been 23 years in Parliament now. When I came to Parliament 23 years ago, my entire approach to my constituency or to my people, when I used to ask for a vote, and now my own approach to my people is hugely different. Sunil, you've come to my place, so you know how even in smaller places, education and other things have changed. Rajan has come with me. You can see that the kind of difference there is in the aspirational youth of our country. And we do not really, connect with them as much as we should, or we still think that, a young boy from rural India is not really on par with in his thinking with youth of Delhi or Mumbai. But that has changed hugely, and that's why that competitive pressure has come on us also. And therefore, I, at least as one very strong advocate of economic growth in our country, always tell and convince people, even in the constituency, when I have, say, an industry coming up in our constituency, the classical example is, हम ज़मीन नहीं देंगे, ज़मीन देंगे नहीं तो फिर उसके लिए पानी नहीं देंगे, उसके लिए हम ये नहीं करेंगे, तो fine, that is all right. These are all emotional issues which people will come out with. But on the other side, if you go to the same place and you say, without talking about the industry, supposing there is no industry, the first demand will come from there, साहब नौकरी नहीं है, रोजगार नहीं है, कुछ उद्योग लाइए, कुछ काम करिए जिससे हमारे लोगों के बच्चों का भविष्य बनेगा. So this is exactly, the same place. Before an industry comes up, the language will be this. The moment something comes up, the language changes. So you have to balance interests, whether it is at the local political level, whether it's at the macroeconomic level, whether it's at the country level. All these issues will have to be dealt with in the new, I would say, paradigm of a new aspirational India. And therefore, even as you redefine your business model, earlier, as I said, in the license quota Raj, I think the insulation to Indian industry was different. That has all long gone away. Last 15, 20 years, everybody is in a very global and a competitive world. Hero would never have thought of parting ways with a Japanese colleague until a few years ago, because a new, confident and a resurgent India looks at the challenges ahead far more aggressively and more confidently. We have many examples, not Hero alone, but we have examples across industry after industry, many business groups which have now not only done very well within India, but now they are going abroad and making major acquisitions, and probably those acquisitions are more profitable than even their Indian operations, and probably better run than the Indian operations. So this is a new world, a new era, and therefore if anybody says that I will look at politics without economics, so going back to the subject of, or the theme of this conference, economics and politics, I think there is no solution to India or Indian politics if I think that I can perform well by only being socialist or trying to give and give and give and not having an option to receive or take from somewhere to be able to give back, I think that model is simply not going to work. It may work for a while. It can work for, an emotional outburst can create a goodwill for a political party or an individual for some time. But to think that that is going to give you again and again and again the benefits of, coming back to a power and position is simply not going to be acceptable. And that's why I said the demographics. I mean, I'm just trying to now link in all the 2, 3, 4 points I made is that unless you have good economics, sound economics, we will never be able to have good politics. But of course, in a country still, I mean, the caveat will always be there, at least for the next 10, 20 years, if I see it, not more than that we will have to be very, very tolerant also to a certain, and it's a large section of society. Mind you, if we say that, so many more people have become brought into the middle class bracket, or people have more economic, incomes at their disposal, all that is fine. But there is, in terms of population, we have still, even if it's a smaller percentage, by numbers, they are still bigger than most countries of the world. So we have a large population which still needs to be, in some way looked after. And let's not forget that even in the US, even in the UK, even in most advanced countries, the countries or the governments look after the welfare of people who are not so well off. So it's nothing that we are doing something very different when people say, you're giving food subsidy, or you're giving Manrega, or you're doing this, which is not very good. Where's the money to fund all this? Well, that debate will go on even in the US. The healthcare issue on which Obama fought the last election, was it not a huge pressure on the American economy? But yes, ultimately, you have to marry the interests of a large section of society with the policies of the government. So broadly speaking, yes, it is, of course, important that we have good economics and good politics, with, of course, these caveats included. And coming back to some of the issues which you raised, Sunil, about the economic slowdown, I am one person who has never shied away from saying that in the last 3-4 years, we have scored many self-goals ourselves. I don't think the Indian economy is that badly poised. I mean, in spite of the global pressures, of course, we live in a globalized world, integrated world, so there will be pressures of, oil prices, or there will be pressures because the other economies have slowed down, so exports will be affected, and so on. But that notwithstanding, I mean, what stops us, if you look at our own power sector, we look at our own road sector, we look at our own infrastructure building sector, I think these factors really were not to be so much influenced by the global economy as much as our own ability to deliver these things on time in a proper price-effective manner. And if you just look at the power sector, I mean, we have 100 years of proven coal reserves in this country, and power thermal power is one area which is after 30, 40 years probably going to become redundant, because there will be new technologies. We know how solar and other technologies, the costs have been, coming down rapidly. So at 30, 40 years down the line, when we are going to have alternative sources of power, we with 100 years proven reserves are not mining our own coal and running all the way helter-skelter to Indonesia, to Australia, to South Africa, to wherever, to buy coal and to bring it here, making that coal more expensive, so passing on a higher cost to industry, to consumers, delaying power projects, making, our own projects, cost overruns and making it ineffective. So there are so many issues which we as a nation could have addressed better, we as a government could have addressed better, and that is why I think there is also a participation which has to be from all sections of society. It cannot be only the government saying that, all right, government has a responsibility, and as Sunil rightly said, coalition politics, there are difficulties. In spite of that, tough decisions have been taken, it's not that. But yes, I agree, those decisions sometimes, a stitch in time saves nine. Those are the adages which we should have also followed, that because of certain compulsions, a decision which could have been taken today gets delayed by 3 years, 4 years, and these are not things which are very good for the Indian economy. Now, that notwithstanding, I'm sure we are all very optimistic in our country, because of the inherent strength of the Indian economy. That again is the demographics of India also, in spite of all what we have said, and it is not something I'm saying for the first time. Everybody knows that we still enjoy the benefits of a large nation with a large a home economy, which certainly can take, a lot of pulls and pressures of the external economy with ease and yet keep growing. So I'm sure that if everybody, including the government, including all the policy makers, including industry, business, opinion makers, and everybody gets their act together, India certainly can be, again, a very, very interesting story. But I would subscribe fully that, yes, there is no future to India's development unless we have sound economics, because at the end of the day, that is something which can only bring you more jobs, create more economic activity, can make a larger section of people inclusive in the growth process of the country. Thank you very much, and I'm sure this Mindmine Summit, I have the occasion of coming here the second time. I was in its second version and now in its seventh version. Well, I'm very happy that you all are doing a good job in terms of bringing this kind of an audience together. And I was telling Pawan also that maybe you should try to carry this summit outside of Delhi, because Delhi is having a far too much overdose of summits. So I think we can have a little bit of redistribution of the Mindmine outside of Delhi, because India is still much, much more outside of Delhi. We politicians forget that, but I'm sure you know where all you sell your two-wheelers. Thank you very much. Come.
The interactive session you'll have.
Yeah, if I may.
All right, great.
Thank you, Praful. You made an interesting comment that we have made many self-goals. You said this earlier on repeat occasions that we are shooting ourselves in the foot. But we suddenly seem to have woken up a few months ago. So do you think this is too little, too late? Or is it at least something is happening now?
Well, I think let's acknowledge that, yes, in spite of whatever has happened, we can't be crying over spilt milk, and we can't be thinking that, okay, now this is a permanent situation. I think we have to grow out of that, and I genuinely feel that within government, outside of government, in industry and in the country, people are now feeling that, let's not get too bogged down. We saw 2 years ago, any small activist could stop the, the entire functioning of parliament, government. The country is to come to a standstill. That's changed, isn't it? I am not going into any individual or specifics, but that's why there was a time when the country's mood and everybody's mood had gone into, I would say, a shell. But I'm sure that people are opening up, and I think I think the worst is over. Let's put it that way.
You also made an interesting comment about power, coal and power just now, which you have done earlier as well. On one occasion, I heard you say that the solution to the power problem is actually very simple. Is there some advice you have for the government and for industry? How do you think this can be solved? Because this seems to be one of our big hurdles for growth today, seems to be inavailability and lack of quality power, both. Lack of availability and lack of quality.
Well, we certainly had a few activists in the government who really started the problems. But I'm sure now the government, at least the Prime Minister and the senior team, does feel that, we have to rein in this activism within the government also. I can understand activism for a cause, but misguided activism also, somewhere an astute and alert society, and includes people sitting in this room, we all have to acknowledge that we have to draw a line somewhere. Like we talk of economics and politics, somewhere the line has to be drawn. Same way, activism in a country as large as India, how are you going to, you want everything picture perfect, but you don't want to, you want development, you want growth, but no pain, no sacrifice, nothing. So as I give you the example, you see, some of the observations I was making very briefly, when I said you go to a village, in my constituency, they will say, साहब नौकरी नहीं है, यहाँ पर उद्योग धंधे नहीं है, हम लोग सब मजदूर है, बेकार है, हमारे लिए बच्चों के लिए कुछ करिए. The day you start, bringing somebody, I get hold of you and say, come Sunil, put up a plant there, The first thing will be हम जमीन नहीं देंगे, हम पानी नहीं देंगे, हम ये नहीं करेंगे, वो नहीं करेंगे, हमारे नौकरी चाहिए, ये चाहिए, वो चाहिए. So I'm just giving a very I would say a loose and innocuous example, but the fact is, even in government, we have a lot of sections which come with misguided activism.
Well, yesterday some of us heard the Prime Minister speak, and he did tell the industry, in so many words, not to be too very pessimistic. But you can't help being pessimistic. The situation on the ground is like that. Then he also talked about once again pushing reforms. We've seen reforms come about in the early 90s and then later, and now probably the third wave of reforms. Do you think we will have labor reforms, good labor reforms? This is one of the very important constituencies and very important parameters for especially manufacturing, and we need manufacturing to grow.
You want a frank answer?
Absolutely.
I don't see it coming in the near future. If you want a frank answer, I don't see anything coming in the near future. There's no thought process. It's all on paper, but nothing is going to be translated into action.
So how does one?
I'm talking of only one part of the issue. I mean, I'm not talking of reforms as a whole. I'm just talking of the limited issue which you raised about labor reforms. I think, but if you look at things in perspective, I mean, I know we are in Delhi and Haryana and Manesar is right next door, but if you see India in totality, I see even in labor, even in the working class, a far more different approach than what it ever was 20 years ago. I come from Mumbai. I know the famous textile workers strike. I know the strikes which used to take place in Pune and all around because being the industrial area of corridor of our country. And things then and now have hugely changed. And I would also give credit to the employers. I mean, let's not just put it only to the workers. I would say the employers also have become far, far more different and in their approach, more responsive, more understanding. And as companies have done better, they have also not shied away from transferring some of the benefits they accrue to the people who work for the organization. And that is a very healthy sign. And if you see in totality, therefore, so if you talk of labor reform, you see in a classical context, that hire and fire policy which is prevalent in the West or in other countries, maybe no. But if you look at it in a larger context, I think as a partnership between the working class and the employers, there is far, far much more, I would say, understanding, synergy, and I would say a better approach to understanding each other than it was ever in the past. And that has changed. You see far less strikes in the country. A bank strike or a organized strike by a certain section once in few years, which otherwise used to be almost the order of the day. I think in the last 5-10 years, a lot of water and positive direction, the water has flowed.
So, you made a comment that as a political entity, you have to take care of the large section of society, which is obviously understandable. But if you look at India today, if you look at both our fiscal deficit and our current account deficit, which from a global perspective are the most worrying features of our economy today, I'm not sure if it has had enough impact on the entire government, and I mean entire government. Of course, the finance minister has been very vocal in his attempt to rein in the deficit, and he's made this quite clear. But I'm not sure there's a full realization in large sections of the government as to what they can contribute or what they need to do to ensure that your ratings remain healthy, that your deficit remain within control, so you can continue to run the system and do the things you want to do. Do you think there is a good answer for this somewhere?
You see, now you talking of the deficit, largely our deficit comes because of the oil pool account. because of the large imports we have, and that really puts a huge pressure on the system. I mean, that is where I said sometimes you have had some self-goals. For years and years, we didn't tinker with the price of diesel and other petroleum products. And suddenly, when we came to such a situation where the economy, the ratings, everything was under extreme pressure, we went and increased the price of diesel by 5 rupees, and then we said we'll keep it on a we'll commit to bring it to market prices. And all this could have been done gradually over the last 5 years, and I don't think that would have been that much of a pain on the, to the average person. And it would have probably been much better for the economy in terms of containing the fiscal deficit and, the current account deficit.
Yep.
So it's not just one issue. I'm saying a lot of such issues. Suddenly, in a time of stress, we are now, reacting much faster. And I don't think there has been as much negativity as people expected, that if prices of diesel will go up by 5 rupees, there'll be bloodshed or there'll be people on the streets. Nothing of that sort happened. So I think it's sometimes, we really should also be understanding that yes, slightly we should be passing on costs. May not be exorbitant, but if it's done in a sustained manner, probably it may be good for our economy.
You're probably right. The NDA government raised fuel prices 14 times. There was no protest even once.
Well, they had lesser pressures than the current government in terms of the bandwidth in which the price movement was there at that time.
No, but it was also done over a period of time.
I mean, I appreciate. I mean, irrespective of the government.
Yes.
But you see, actually, what happened is, what I feel is, around 2007-8, the prices of oil started shooting up so much, and at 2008 levels, I think it was $147 a barrel. So I think that was the time when the government, under acute pressure, did not act, and I think that was the time when some of the costs should have been passed on, and that would have probably eased the pressure, and I think, and then it cumulatively just kept building up.
So if you look at India 25 years out, do you see us still running the similar political system? Do you see us still in coalition governments? Where do you think we would be as far as our rankings go in terms of ease of doing business, in the Human Development Index, and our size of the economy?
Answering the last question first, I think size of the economy by natural progression, and just because of the sheer size of India, and even if, as all of us acknowledge, even at an 8% rate of growth, the size of Indian economy over the next 20 years has to move into a different orbit. But the fact is that, yes, in terms of doing ease of business, doing, or you seeing the overall parameters of the economy and the politics of Indian politics, the coalition politics, I think coalition politics is now here to stay. I don't think we should be now, engaging ourselves whether this is going to happen or not going to happen. The fact is how responsible each political party is in terms of economics, and I think the principal parties, whether it's the Congress or the BJP, at least for the time being, these two are, and I don't see that changing very fast, that these two principal political parties, they must be able to or willing to bite the bullet on economic issues. And I'm sure, as the nuclear deal demonstrated, though it's not an economic measure, but we saw during the nuclear debate, when everybody felt that this is going to be one moment where the government will fall, there was still enough support within the system to see that the government did not fall. All I'm trying to say, the limited point I'm trying to make is that even on the most contentious or the most emotional issues, there can be a chance to be able to bite the bullet and survive, of course.
Well, people have often said that the two political parties with the most similar economic agenda is actually the BJP and the Congress. Well, so why are they not able to agree when these issues come up for debate or discussion in Parliament?
Do you think Indian politics is so simple?
I think the mic's dropped off.
Let's.
Politics is going to be certainly complex and will get complicated to an extent. But as I said, at some stage on economic issues, we will be able to come around. And I think over a period of time also, there will be more federalism and more genuine federalism in the country. On many issues, I think we will be having a situation where on many issues the states will have a larger say. And I think in the long-term interest of a united and I would say a dynamic India, this would be also in the larger scheme of things a beneficial step. Of course, it's not going to happen in a hurry, but I think over a period of time we will have to find and evolve a much more workable federal structure which will give enough power, enough economic incentives and autonomy to the states, at the same time keeping the larger structure in place. I will ask the last question.
I'm going to take you back to another sector which is having difficult times. Your earlier ministry, aviation, the aviation sector. 2009, you probably said that Air India should recover in about 2 years' time. It hasn't. First question, is it time to privatize Air India? Number two, FDI was permitted after your watch. Do you think it can and will transform the fortunes of this industry?
If you ask me at a personal level, I always would have favored a privatization of Air India. Not for any other reason, but if you look at it, any service sector, I think where consumer interface is there and services are there, I think it's best left to the private sector. And if you're talking of privatization, the only genuine privatization since 2004 in this government has been the privatization of Mumbai and Delhi, Hyderabad and Bangalore airports. I think, therefore, to understand where I come from and what my thinking is, I think there you have the answer. And I also feel that an industry like aviation is a very dynamic industry. It is very cyclical. It's very, very, the scenario changes as the headwinds and the crosswinds and the tailwinds keep changing all the time. The same speed aviation also keeps, encountering different kinds of winds. So sometimes there are very strong tailwinds and you see a long, years of growth. But at the same time, I personally feel, why should we as a government be so worried? If anybody has the appetite to start an airline and run an airline, so be it, and we should support it. And I think we have some very good models in our own country where private sector has done exceedingly well in a very, very competitive and a difficult scenario. And if you ask me, as a person who has seen the sector from very closely, I think some of our airlines are run as well as the best in the world. So there is no question of, I think, thinking otherwise. As far as the first question on whether we should be doing the business or not, I think I've given you the answer. And FDI, what you mentioned, well, I was advocating a 26% FDI to begin with in the days we were there. We had some opposition from left parties, and that's why it was put on the back burner. I'm happy that's finally happened, and I'm sure FDI, but I can repeat one thing, FDI or no FDI, it's still a question of how well a company is run.
Thank you very much. Don't think there could have been a better person because he's completely in sync with the theme. There's economics and politics, and he comes from a business background and now heads the political scene very much. Pavanji, would you like to round up this session by saying a little bit before we close?
Yes, right now.
Somewhere else.
Yeah, I wish we had a live telecast here as well in the background.
That will answer a lot of questions for the future.
Actually, some of our audience are sitting there right now.
Do you really believe that?
Well, I made an observation. I didn't say, no further questions arising out of that. Politically correct.
Let me start by congratulating Sunil and his team getting over the 7-year itch and finally organizing this 8th edition of the Mindmine Summit. It's been, as Sunil mentioned, evolving, changing formats, and it's come to a very interesting format now. We've heard the terms politics and economics quite a few times in the morning. I don't know the real difference. I thought in India they were one and the same thing. When baby sharks are born, they instantly swim away from the mothers because the mother possibly is going to eat them, think them as prey and eat them. I believe this is what is happening actually here in the country with business and politics today. With all the stuff that's going on in the environment, the scams, the nexus between business and politics, both are actually trying to keep a healthy distance from each other. Each thinks the other one is the shark. Very appropriate set of lines here. Be careful of the words you say and keep them soft and sweet, for you never know from day to day which ones you'll have to eat. You also said that when you first stood up here, and you said that you're not going to say much in today's times. You can't say much. You say something today, 2 days later, you don't know whether you're going to eat your breakfast or you're going to eat your own words. I just mentioned the Prime Minister's speech yesterday, but then also the ground realities. We must look at the ground realities very, very severely and seriously. So I don't know whether how long the UPA is going to last. I don't know whether the so-called MYA, Mulayam Yadav alliance, will take place. What the growth is going to be like, 6% more or less. We don't know who the next Prime Minister is going to be. We don't know the situation of the stock market, the rupee, the crude prices. These are all the current account deficits. These are all very, very fluid situations. But I personally am a born optimist, and I do believe in the underlying potential of India. Praful also mentioned it is all about the country, about the resurgent confidence amongst ourselves, which is why companies like ourselves decided to go on our own. And I also believe that we are a country which is probably operating at less than 50% of our potential. Given the environment, India can really, really go places. And I'm glad that the Prime Minister is also trying to assure the industry and the country through the industry that he and his team is serious about the next wave of reforms. And as I said, we really hope that this happens so that all of us in the industry can really take the country forward. Through you, Mr. Minister, just a small message. Yesterday is a cancelled check. Tomorrow is a promissory note. Today is ready cash. So let's really use this ready cash, whatever we have, and make things happen. Thank you very much.
Good.
Thank you very much, Pavanji. May I now request Mr. Sumant Munjal to offer a memento to our honored chief guest. Mr. Patel, please. Just a token of thanks, thanking Prafulji for being here, having spared his time and being part of the inauguration session for Mindmine Summit 2013. Thank you very much, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Praful Patel, Honorable Minister of Heavy Industries and Public Enterprises, Government of India. Friends, we now break for tea and we'll resume our sessions in 20 minutes exactly. So let's be here and reassemble at 11:25 or so.